Hello and welcome back to Mortars and Motors. In today's episode I'm going to be driving this rather fantastic Saab 900 Turbo, and it is quite resplendent in this amazing iconic 80s white paint colour, but I think it might actually be a 90s car. I know nothing about this car because the owner has not briefed me at all. It is a J-Reg, so that does mean that it's a 91 or 92. That's the important badge that it has, the Turbo. That's what we need on a Saab 900. So this is a facelift 900, I know that much, which means it's got the much more sticky out plastic bumpers, which I don't think really mind them particularly, especially because it's got the plastic cladding going down the side of the body as well. It has an enormously long bonnet that goes like, I don't know, that must be 1.5 meters worth of bonnet. And obviously on the Saabs it opens in forwards, a bit like my Volvo 340. We've got that incredibly curved windscreen, which I'm looking forward to sitting behind in a minute to see what that's actually like from inside. The Volvo 240 I have as a curved windscreen as well, but it's nowhere near as intense as it is in the Saab 900. This is a 3-door body style. We've got the iconic 3-spoke Saab alloys, which is a very, very Saab thing to do, so it's absolutely the correct alloys to have for this car. And we have this rather fabulous little kind of, what would I say, a fishtail or a mermaid's tail spoiler coming out the back of it, which makes it, I think everybody knows that you've got a turbo when you've got that kind of spoiler on the back of your car. Around the back here we've got a flashback going around the number plate, which is just such a early 90s detail. You knew that you had a really kind of fast, sporty car if you had a flashback behind the number plate. I had it in my 440 and it kind of just really lifted it. Not all 440s had it. And we've also got, it's a hatchback, of course. You kind of forget that they're a hatchback because they're such a huge car. It's so unusual to have a hatchback on something this big back in the day. The 900s were, of course, available as a saloon as well, but this is particularly the hatchback style. Looking at the boot itself, we have a rear wiper, and the motor is really quite ungainly. It's kind of mounted just behind the glass there. It's not hidden in any way. And I think that is probably one of many details we're going to come across on this car that kind of betrays the fact that it is actually a car designed in the 1970s and launched in the 1970s. So I've got the key. This is the first time I'm ever going to touch this car, so you can come around with me and have a look at it. Okay, central locking doesn't work. So the first thing I notice is that most of the sill disappears out with the door, which is really rather unusual. I've never seen that in a car before. Wow, okay. The door is a really tall door because it takes part of the sill of the car with it, which is, yeah, really unusual. I've never seen that before. We have a very large, wide door pocket that's the width of the door, a little armrest built in, a very basic kind of, there you go, that's another 70s throwback there, isn't it? We've got kind of a leatherette strip to close the door. And I think that's probably the pull to open it. No window controls on the door, which is quite unusual for a car, but not for a Saab. There's not a lot of cabin space there. Look, my foot could barely get in. That's another throwback, I think, to the 70s. And yeah, it feels, my very first initial impression is, this is quite small. For what looks like a big old brute of a car, which the 900 definitely is. I mean, look at the thickness of the sides of it, look at the length of it, and the bonnet length. It's quite a small interior in here. It's very dinky and compact. I can almost touch the other side of the car without stretching. This is like a Cinquecento. I'm able to do that. The dashboard is quite high up, but that's a very Saab thing, because I think ergonomically it's much safer to have everything kind of high up there, so all the controls that you're going to be using in your eye line, so you're not really having to drop your eyes from the road. And I've liked that in a lot of other cars. A Volvo 440 and the 240 are both quite similar with things quite up high. But let's have a little tour of the dashboard and see what we can see. So over on the right hand side we've got an air vent that moves. We've got a fixed one there that's for the window. Some light controls which seem quite conventional. I think that's light height, headlight height. That, I'm guessing, is maybe a mirror adjustment. Yes, it must be electric mirror adjustment. A fog light, rear fog light over there. Instrument cluster itself is resplendent in orange everywhere. It's a classic Saab thing. And we have the most important Saab dial here, of course, which is the turbo boost gauge. I'm looking forward to seeing that when I start the car up in a little bit. We've also got a rev counter, we've got a clock, fuel, temperature. Yeah, everything you need. all good. Oh, that one then to the left-hand side must be the left-hand mirror adjustment. I kind of feel like that switch, that mirror switch, seems to have been sort of thrown at the dashboard from quite a significant distance. Anyway, centre of the dashboard, we've got some more gauges here. We've got oil pressure, outside temperature and voltage. Lovely. They're very similar to the ones I get in my 240. Below them, we've got some heater controls, fan speed, heat and direction of the heat. And then below that, we've got some buttons. Another fog light, one of them must be front. That must be rear wiper, heated rear window, and hazard warnings. I do like to see, it's another kind of little throwback to the 70s. It's a separate switch for the rear wiper. It's not on the stalk. I have that in the Metro where it's a separate switch. Below that, we've got an ashtray that opens out to reveal an ashtray. Excellent. A radio, not a period one sadly, but that's okay. We have a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is trimmed in a bit of leather. It's a little bit worn, but you know, it's to be expected for a car of this age. We have, oh, that's a classic Saab thing. The internal courtesy light is down here in the centre console as well. We've got the key locks down there, as a Saab should have. And then next to the handbrake, we've got the electric window controls left and right. And the third button is for the sunroof. There's a tilt and slide sunroof up here, which you can't quite see. There you go. On the passenger side, we have this very sculpted glove box that's kind of curved into the dash. I rather like that. Let's have a quick look inside it. It feels quite brittle. I don't want to touch it too much. There's quite a lot of space inside there. I like that it's got the 900 logo. Stepping out of the car, you can have a look at the very sculpted looking Saab seats and that kind of iconic horseshoe shaped headrest for the front seats. The seats on a Saab, I remember from my old 900 convertible, they're actually really quite thin. So for these Swedish supportive, comfortable seats that are renowned for their comfort, they're really quite narrow in terms of their profile. Let's have a look at the back. No fun and games in terms of how that seat folds. In the back then, we have got a very velour trimmed 3-piece bench here that I think is not split folding from what I can tell. Well, accommodation here in the back of the Saab is actually really quite nice. The headroom is okay. There's a little bit of a cutout in the headliner above me so that you've got a little bit of extra headroom. Very plush headrests as well. They're very, very soft and nice. The seats are quite springy and bouncy. It's pretty good. And we have an armrest because it's a Swedish car and they love their armrests for some reason. In terms of amenities in the back here, you don't really get a lot. There's some very basic looking door cards where you can just have a little bit of a cutout for your arm. We do get rear pop-out windows, so let's have a look. Let's see what happens when I pop these out. Pop. Hey, excellent. A little bit of extra ventilation. And down in the centre console there is an ashtray. That's about all that rear passengers get, but you know, that's nothing unusual. I've just noticed on the spoiler here that there are these little holes just here, and I thought, ooh, is there something missing? But actually they're drain holes so that water doesn't kind of pool in here like a little mini swimming pool in the back of your Saab, so it drains down there and there's some corresponding little guttering down here that kind of lets the water out, just out of these little holes there. I suspect they could get very blocked. Okay, let's have a quick look in the boot. I don't know how this opens. Oh, it's open. There we go. Oh God, it's a heavy old boot, isn't it? Crikey. This is a big old hatchback boot, but the parcel shelf doesn't go up with the boot lid, which again is 70s design, like a Volvo 340. Still being sold in the 90s. You've got to love the Swedes. They just keep flogging them, don't they? However, having said that it doesn't go up with the boot, there is a little clicky thing that holds the parcel shelf in place. And it's spring-loaded. That's quite neat. I like that. That's a neat way of doing it. It works. That's a vast, vast boot. I'm going to get in it. How can I not get in it? This is a huge, big boot. Shame they never made an estate of these, because I've seen, I think, a couple of prototypes, and they actually look really smart. And it would be massive as an estate. But I mean, as a hatchback, it's still huge. You just obviously can't put big square things in it. We do have hiding in the corner of the boot a CD changer. I think that probably isn't standard to Saab. Let's have a look under the floor. We got there. We have got stuff. Okay, big underfloor storage. A little bit of rust as well, but we'll ignore that. There we go. Also, putting this parcel shelf down, I note that it is actually very purple in parts, so it must be very faded. I don't know whether it started out life as kind of black and has faded purple, or whether it's supposed to be purple. I don't know. The other thing to note about it is that it's really heavy, and it is made of like a pretty solid piece of wood here. That is a chunky piece of engineering. Must be really good for soundproofing. Oh, the inside of the boot is trimmed with this kind of vinyl leatherette stuff. I quite like it. Again, very, very 70s. It looks like the door cards of like a Morris Marina or something like that. And then we have a grab handle. I wonder whether the grab handle was there on the 80s versions of these. I think it might be a 90s edition, but I could well be proved wrong. Because it's so unusual to have a grab handle on a 70s car. And it's made of metal. It's like a little twist of metal, like a curl. All right, let's get that closed. Oh God, this is a big old heavy tailgate. Blimey. Okay, let's open this bonnet. I've never opened a Saab 900 bonnet before. Let's have a look. We have to do it this bit first, don't we? Yeah, I found it. And then it cantilevers. Oh, that's fun. That's very fun. Okay. Inside the bonnet, it reveals, and this is where I admit that I haven't done my research and I don't know what the displacement of this engine is. If I know Saab, I would say it's a 2-litre turbo. It is canted at a very funky angle in order to get it under this quite low slung hood. It's at I think sort of a 45-degree angle. And it is also backwards, so it mounted lengthways in the car but backwards to traditional rear-wheel drive, and then the drive goes from the front of the engine down to the differential and then to the transmission, which is underneath the engine, a bit like a Mini or a Metro, and then drives the front wheels. So it's a super unusual way of making a front-wheel drive car work. This is a very complicated or complex arrangement of design in the front of this car, isn't it? Because we've got these kind of little cubbies almost in the side of the wheel arch where equipment is put. So you've got, I think that's a washer bottle, power steering fluid, some electrical stuff, and it's the same on the other side. And then there's like a bulkhead here, which then houses inside it the major mechanical components, engine, etc. A fun little design feature in this really rather theatrical bonnet opening mechanism is that there's a little hole just about there behind the hinge. If you want to adjust the headlights, because obviously they are blocked by the bonnet, but you want to go inside here to adjust the beam, you can put a screwdriver in there and it holds the bonnet at just the right angle, so you can get your hand in to adjust the beam, but you can still see the beams out to the wall or something in front of you. It's quite fun. That's a heck of a bonnet. That is a bonnet and a half, that. Right, let's take this Saab on the road. Oh, that's very roary. Very nice. Okay. The streets of London is not the place to drive this car. It needs an open road to see what it's like. But yeah, I quite like it. It's narrower than it feels, so it's easy to drive around here, but it is very long. So I did have to just do a 3-point turn, which is slightly stressful because I didn't know where the back of it was or the front of it. The gear change is quite slick, especially going up from second to third. It's quite nice. It's very positive. Reasonably engaging, one could almost say. Visibility is not too bad at all. The pillars are really very slim, and because the windscreen is kind of raked all around you, yeah, you've got quite a good kind of fish tank visibility here. The suspension is not very forgiving. It's not crashy, but it's not soft either. The power steering is nice and heavy in this car. The Volvo version of a power steering from the 1980s is really overly light. It almost feels like it doesn't have power steering. Obviously it does, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to steer in this kind of environment. Okay, I've parked up a little bit and I've played with a few of the controls, managed to get the sunroof open, bravely pressed the button, which actually brings a bit more light to this cabin. Behind the gear stick there is this little button here which says TM on it, and TM stands for Traffic Master, and this was an old kind of pre-sat-nav system that alerted you to traffic issues and problems up ahead. There were little cameras dotted around the motorway network, little blue cameras, and it would sort of come through the audio of the car, and it was quite cool. I never got to use it, sadly, but it was a very cool invention where it would just kind of tell you that there'd be an issue up ahead. It's actually quite easy to thread through these London streets. It's quite narrow and compact compared to a modern car. Really surprisingly so. I was expecting it to feel so much bigger. And definitely it feels like it keeps up with modern traffic really well. The 2-litre engine is nice and smooth, you can barely hear it, all you can hear is the exhaust note, and it really pulls nice and cleanly in all the gears. It's a great little drive, I have to say. I'm quite impressed. I'd love to be able to take it out on a country road and really give it its, push it through its paces, or put it through its paces to see, you know, how it accelerate from 30 at a roundabout to 60s. I mean, like that'd be quite fun. I suspect it's going to be great, but sadly we're in kind of suburban London today, and without joining the very, very red looking bit on Google Maps on the M4, I can't really go faster than 30 miles an hour, sadly. I love the gauges and the dials. They're almost like a cartoon. They're just slightly oversized, but they're really, really clear and easy to read. Especially the speedometer, which is right there in the middle, like slapping you in the face almost. It's great fun. Well, my Saab 900 Turbo adventure comes to a close as I stand next to the fabulous little whale tail as a little flick up to the 1980s, which this car really very much is. I've really enjoyed driving this car. I hope you've enjoyed having a look around it. It's really surprised me in quite a number of ways. It's much smaller than I expected. It's much smoother than I expected. And it's much more 70s than I expected. But you know, that's the sort of thing that gives this car its charm. It's totally, totally different to the 900 new generation that I had, the GM version, which is the one that came after this. They are very, very different beasts, and I have to say, I definitely prefer this one. And on that note, thank you ever so much for joining me for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and join me again in the next video where I drive something completely different. See you next time.